ரெக்கார்டிங் ஆரம்பிச்சிடுங்க.
ஓகே சார்.
இதே யூடியூப் ஸ்ட்ரீமிங். Very good. Okay. Shall we wait for a minute or so? நடிச்சிடலாமா அப்போ?
Yes sir. 1 minute na 6 o'clock ஆகும். நீங்க சொல்ற மாதிரி 6 o'clock ஆரம்பிக்கும். 1 minute.
1 minute. We'll start. Shall I go ahead? So Dr. TR?
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Ready? We'll start now. PVS?
I'm ready whenever you are ready.
Okay.
Yes sir, please sir.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Ramasami and Mr. Varun Agarwal and all the participants. On behalf of the organizing units, Computer Society of India, IEEE Computer Society and ACM, I would like to extend warm welcome to this important webinar on scientific research in India. Basically, the scientific research is indication of country's progress and its image all over the world. So today we are fortunate to have two eminent speakers. Dr. T. Ramasami, who was the former Secretary of Department of Science and Technology, is with us as the chief guest, and he is going to provide his views on the future directions for science research in India. I have the great pleasure of introducing both the speakers one by one. Dr. Thirumalai Ramasami, popularly known as Dr. TR, was the Indian Science and Technology Secretary during the period 2006 and 2014. Earlier to that, he had served as the Director of Central Leather Research Institute, Chennai. He had also held the additional charge as the Director General of CSIR. He is a distinguished researcher and leather scientist. He was awarded India's National Civilian Honor, the Padma Shri for Excellence in Science and Engineering in 2001 and the Padma Bhushan in 2014. He was awarded the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, the highest award for science in India, for his notable outstanding research in chemical sciences in 1993. Dr. TR is an alumnus of University of Madras and University of Leeds, England. He holds 41 patents, of which 14 have been commercialized. Over 220 research publications, 8 book chapters, and numerous journal articles. During his 8 years stint in DST, Dr. TR was instrumental in launching many new programs and increasing the budget for science research several fold. Dr. TR is a recipient of 63 awards and several endowment lectures. He is an elected fellow of Indian Academy of Sciences, Indian National Science Academy, the National Academy of Sciences of India, Indian National Academy of Engineers, and World Academy of Sciences. Welcome, Dr. Ramasami. And next, I am privileged to introduce the speaker, Mr. Varun Agarwal. He is a researcher, entrepreneur, and author. In 2008, he co-founded Aspiring Minds, a company involved in skill assessment for employability and many more things. And Varun is an engineer from NSIT, which is now called NSUT, went to MIT for his master's in electrical engineering and computer science. His work has led to the world's first machine learning based assessment of coding skills and the world's first automated motor skills assessment. Varun has published more than 30 research papers, and his work has been covered by many national and international media houses. He has authored the book Leading Science and Technology, India Next. And he started the Machine Learning India to build India's AI ecosystem and organize the world's first data science camp for school children. Varun was awarded his Humis Award in 2006 for developing algorithms that mimic human intelligence. So let me brief you about today's session with certain facts, trends, and questions to ask. Research is the backbone of innovation. Everyone is aware of that. Unfortunately, India's research ecosystem is extremely tiny compared to the size of its problems and challenges. As we make progress as a developing nation, both intellectuals and popular media widely discuss economy, politics, and various social issues, but scientific and technological innovations seldom make it to the list of trending topics in the major newspapers. The direction where we are headed is something to worry about. Why India not to do well in innovation? Why don't we have universities like MIT and Stanford? Does India have sophisticated world-class startups and companies like Tesla and Google? India's contribution to disruptive research is 7 times lower than China and 17 times lower than USA. Only 10 scientists from India were featured in the world's highly cited researchers list compared to 482 from China. In this webinar, Dr. Ramasami, the guest of honor, having been head of DST, the national policy making body in scientific research, will brief us on the directions in scientific research in India. After this, the speaker, Mr. Varun, will explain where in India research ecosystem, which forms the foundation of innovation for any country, and what we can do to revolutionize it. According to Mr. Varun, it is time to do some course correction to build India into a nation that cultivates scientific innovations within its borders. So with these few words of introduction, may I request Dr. Ramaswamy to address us. Yes, sir.
presenting you there. Okay. Okay, now I. Well, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Uh,
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Let me first of all congratulate CSI, Mohan, and all of you here. Let me also congratulate Dr. Varun Agarwal as a focal theme. I'll take a small permission from Mr. Agarwal and say something in Tamil. They usually say when a couple is getting married, the elders bless, Padinaram Petru Peruvalu Valga. Mr. Agarwal has outlined 16 core principles and enumerated associated actions in his book. In short, he has given some very useful directions for Indian science sector. And I may offer my salutations to him and wish him well. Of course, his book on leading science and technology in India next by itself has given certain directions. Of course, my friend Mr. Mohan has repeatedly used the word that I will talk about some direct and scientific research for India. And I don't think I would limit my attention to India. And that is going to be given by a more able person. So, starting with my congratulations to Mr. Agarwal for his bold and thought-provoking directions for Indian research. I said I salute, but I'm going to present you today a ringside view. Because I'm an erstwhile scientist, and I'm a ringside view on what I call the directions of scientific research on a global platform, not just India. Therefore, the context is much wider than the Indian context, and there are reasons why I would like to stay away from focusing on the Indian system. There are reasons for this. If you look at this triangle, there is science, there is technology, there is innovation. There's called a knowledge triangle. In that knowledge triangle, the science advanced knowledge. The driving factor in science is primarily pursuit, and it is you seek excellence. But you go back and ask what was driving science in the past, was scholarship was driving factor. And the scholarship was as a part of the cultural renaissance of the world. And it's a cultural practice that one discussed. Before Industrial Revolution, India was already following a Vigyan model, which is part of the cultural activities of this country. And there was a scholarship-driven activity in which India was. At that time, we didn't call this country India. We had the concept of India. 1950 to 80, policy directions in the world used to be a social contract metaphor. There has to be a country perspective for developmental agenda. 1980 to 2000, there used to be something called Model 2 or Triple Helix, where university, industry, government become three strands of the helix, and the country perspective had to be linked to the R&D organizations to the economic process already in 1980-2000. So the frontier research, which is today a grand challenge of responsible research innovation, that is the policy discourse of the 21st century, where the country and S&T perspectives for leadership in marketplace has become important. It is not just in the scholarship base alone. Therefore, the world policy directions are changing, and that is where we need to ask how the nations develop. Prior to 1900, research remained a passion-driven activity of the rich. I do remember when I came to CLRI as a student, the 9% of the GDP as two benchmark parameters. You can draw a line with 4 quadrants. And there is a quadrant which is below, lower than the 2%, less than the 4%, 4,000 scientists called low resource setting. There is lower risk of failures in the entire mind-to-market chain. It adopts evolutionary paths for development, offers useful gains in established markets in commanding. The paths for development offers useful gains in established markets in commanding. Leapfrog jump with the research paradigm of some nations. Also, the high levels of risk failures in mind-to-market chain. It relies on evolutionary mindsets. It offers first-mover advantage in competitive market space. If you take the leapfrog innovation systems, you will see the top innovation index countries. Take the top 10, 8 or small economies which are focused on leapfrog for advantage in competitive market space, and others on sustainability. 2 large nations, US and the United Kingdom, are part of the 10 high-ranking nations of the innovation space. Now, we need to ask this question: how do we take this long-term sustainability of scientific research? Now, long-term is closely linked to various aspects of knowledge and its societal and gainful applications. Scientific research is truly based on a seamlessly connected body of knowledge, the entire mind-to-market chain, and I call it knowledge goes to know-how, know-how goes to show-how, show-how goes to do-how, do-how goes to use-how. Scientific research could focus on strategic, private, public, and social goods depending upon the social context in which a nation is located. Now, healthcare R&D today to go all the way not only to this context of going to the market, it has to reach people through the clinical research paradigm, not just basic research or applied research going to people directly. There has to be clinical research intervention of the healthcare system. Now, sustaining scientific research globally truly is in need of the time. It needs multiple paths, pluralistic thinking. Calls for partnerships and alliances among all the 4 quadrants in a sense of collaboration. And I believe this is also realized by other countries in the world. R&D direction for gainful use require universities to be engaged in national progress through education as well as development and deployment and dissemination of knowledge. Now, capitalization of intellectual assets through business in R&D results is a kind of an emerging theme. When you look at it in terms of the idea of science discovery going all the way to the marketplace, you would see you take a concept, commercialize it, proof of concept to laboratory unit, then you go through what are valley of death, pilot testing, risk, and finally reach the marketplace. And in terms of investments, the people are somewhat reluctant to invest into ideas from the university system because they are failures processes. So the investment systems go up when they are near the marketplace, the investment go through scaling. Then you talk about optimization, commercial product, and finally to the marketplace. So finally, if you're looking at this industry or your academic research, science process discovery to development and deployment, there has to be a fair amount of processes which are becoming important. So in terms of funding and investments, the government and universities do is one part, in the private sector there's another part, and it turns out there's a gap area. That the basic manufacturing research, proof of concept, production in laboratory, capacity to produce prototypes, capacity production of environment, demonstration of production rates, and so on, these are all part of the processes in a very developed ecosystem. All these are organically and seamlessly connected. In developing economies, not only India, many other places we have those gaps. And the knowledge business links are bridged through technology solutions to problems. And what happens is, I presented a gap area. This is truly a mutual trust which happens between the researcher and the private sector. And there is a gap between the investor and the inventor. So those gaps need to be filled. And industry invests into R&D for gainful use for customer marketplace, and time is money for them. Today, academic research industry government goals are not, they're there, all they share goals, but they're not together. sharing is not together, R&D falls in gap areas, and that's one of the problems that we face today. The current global research direction is towards really integrating this science, research, and innovation. If it happens in vertical silos, it doesn't lead to high trade benefits or economic benefits or the value for people. Therefore, science, research, innovation has to move from a vertical silo model into a system for high trade incomes, and I have used the word Srishti as something that we need to look at. If you look at the new normal after COVID, global economy is under stress, therefore there will be more money, will become more difficult. Essentiality for R&D for public and social good has become more apparent after post-COVID reality. So need for collaborative excellence rather than a competitive excellence systems for meeting what I call the unmet needs and underserved needs of people of the world is felt. More than 70% of the population of the world today cannot afford this R&D outputs generated with high investments. Therefore, we need to look at other alternatives, and therefore, research in low resource setting is a new way forward. In this, there's a vast opportunity for India to lead. Of course, our investments are not proportional to what we need. But if we take 35 least low-income group countries, 55 low-middle-income group countries together, 90 countries, our investments is 90%. And now our income levels have to change. The R&D investments will become higher when it leads to an economic increase and income increase for people as well. Therefore, what the use of research generated huge cost, investment not affordable by many. Therefore, there is a responsibility, and I believe in summary, scientific research has changed from cultural practice of individuals to a planned socio-economic activity of nation-state the development goals and the private sector for profit. R&D in global space built on resource-intense model and competitive excellence will shift towards collaboration for public and social good in wake of COVID-19 pandemic, and science for humanity is the need of the time. Needed directional changes, in my opinion, in research are connect knowledge with the user value and user advantage in the marketplaces and for social good. And the investor-inventor interactions move from transactions to trusted relationships. And I believe when I read the book of Mr. Agarwal, in fact, he has used the word, money is not a bad word. He's realizing this that organic connections that need to happen. And I really believe, he says, look for innovations, but not at the cost of foundations. And you say R&D to make the market. And he's really talking about create competition. These are all issues that are connected to this directional changes in a larger context than just India alone. And in this, I'm going to finish with a quote. This is from Gandhi. He talks about 7 social sins: politics without principles, wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice. Forget about who says it. I believe all these 7 are part of the universal truth. They are valuable for any time, for any place, in any context. And science without humanity, in my opinion, is not perhaps the best thing to celebrate. So the next thing to celebrate, science for humanity, is perhaps needed direction for scientific research in 2020. COVID has brought some very strong lessons to this world. Let me say thank you very much. Thank you. Hello?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Varun?
Yes, Mr. Mohan. Should I go next?
Yeah. Can you take over now? We'll have the Q&A session at the end.
Sure. Let me project my screen. You can see my screen now.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. So thanks, Dr. Ramasami, for that very insightful talk. There's a lot to learn from it, and I was listening quite intently. And I think this is a very good picture you have painted of where science should go for the whole world. And I will try to now delve a little bit on the policy side of how we can enable some of what you have said. And also, I would like to thank Mr. Mohan, who has been quite persistent in getting this session together. Thanks to IEEE, CSI, and ACM for putting this together. And good evening to everyone. I'll now, start this presentation. So this presentation is basically, based on my book, Leading Science and Technology India Next, which came a couple of years back. And it was, I've been both a researcher and an entrepreneur. And it came out of my passion for science because I thought that India can do much better in science and research than it does today. And that led me to a journey to look at what are the issues which plague the science ecosystem today in India and collect a lot of data on it and analyze public data to get some objective view on where we are today and what we can do about it. So, let me start with this question that is really research and innovation important for India, and I might be talking to believers here already, but this is the question which the first part of the book takes up. And I think it's a very, very important question because when we talk about, when we hear the news channels and when we hear the public discourse, we talk a lot about growing economy, that we need to continue to have our economy to grow. We talk a lot about our startup ecosystem. And we also talk considerably and very importantly, and we must, about social development. But we do not talk about science in the same vein or the research ecosystem in the same vein. So is science really important? And a lot of people, when I have given talks about science and research in India, a lot of people come back and tell me, oh, but we should be thinking about feeding the poor. Should a country like India, which still has so many issues with regard to human development indices and so on, should it be even investing and concentrating on science? So that's what the first part of the book. Are the world touch screen, and the third one was disruption in speech recognition. And all of these were uh, coming out of research projects from universities and funded by DARPA and so on. The point which I'm trying to make here is that when we think about great startups when we think about great innovation, naturally people start thinking about startups. But an important connection they miss is that probably the greatest startups which has come around in the world, which has created disruptive value across the globe, they have been backed by uh, scientific research coming out of universities and labs, which have happened recently, and they exploit them to bring products which are world class. And and that's what creates the largest economic value for them and the nation which they are in. So if we want to capture more of the economic value which will be generated in the world, we need to not only be a pioneer in scientific research, but also be able to, as Dr. Ramasamy very well articulated, be able to make that connection and ecosystem between translation of scientific research into products and services. Why it has become even more imperative that you need differentiated products is if you read this book called The Second Machine Age. It is written by an MIT economist who's now moved to Stanford. His name is Eric Brynjolfsson. He says that the world is engaged in a winner takes all market. The next provider might be as good, but it will not matter. What it really means is that all of us probably use the one same search engine. We use one or two e-commerce websites to buy our stuff. In B2B, there's one or two survey companies which dominate all the products. So what is happening around the world is there is a single product or service which is the best, which kind of dominates. Contrasted this with many years back, there could be a lot of products and services which were not the best, but were thriving in their local ecosystem. Now, what does that mean for a company or a country? Is that you need to be creating the best products and best services if you want to be if you want to continue to be in business, right? And you can only do that if you are if you're backed by scientific language technology all the time. And it's not only that your products have to be backed by it once, but it's a continuous process because in the world we are innovation, scientific research is at an exponential pace, and you need to keep upgrading what you have built, right? So that's the first and very important correction which we need to make for people is that when we talk about innovation, we need to not, when the Indian government or Indian people think about innovation, they need to understand that the backbone of innovation is scientific research. And innovation begins in universities and research labs, which lead to research findings. And then innovative entrepreneurs exploit these findings, combining multiple technologies and smart engineering to develop useful products, which are globally competitive and bring them to bring them to the market. So if you really want to be world class and continue our economic growth in this winners take all economy, we need to really invest in scientific research. Just another thing which I would like to say to illustrate this point again is that what I'm saying here is that India's missed the industrial revolution, the internet revolution, the smartphone revolution, and now we are poised to miss the artificial intelligence revolution. And why do I say that? India doesn't have any of the world's largest internet companies. India doesn't have any of the world's largest smartphone companies. And India will not have any of the largest AI companies. And the reason for that is that all of these innovations have come, the innovations which have fueled this have come out of the research ecosystem which has happened in the West. And we have just played catch up to build these technologies. And by that time, they've been first comers and these very nice startup and university ecosystems which are working out in countries like US and now China, which have built the largest companies in the world. So if India wants sustainable economic development, we need to move from being a services economy to an innovation economy. That's the future of the world. And if we want to become an innovation economy, one of the necessary conditions is to be having world-class research in both science and technology. So that's the number one reason. If we want to continue our economic growth, we need to be world-class in scientific research. The other very interesting thing, which I think is that this is the time to invigorate our scientific research agenda. And in the book, I say it is now or never. And why do I say that? Why is it now? One, we've now become a very large economy. We are in PPP terms, the world's third largest economy. That means that we have money to put in research and innovation, which leads to long-term benefits. So we have enough money to divide it both in short-term initiatives and long-term initiatives. Short-term initiatives like social development programs and likewise, but also invest in long-term initiatives. So today, the economy, both the government and private players have that kind of money, which probably they didn't have pre-90s. We do have a large manpower, that has, of course, been an India's asset, demographic dividend, which can be trained to take specialized skills and, fuel the whole innovation ecosystem, starting from research to engineering to creating a market to selling and so on. And we are already showing that in our startup ecosystem. Another benefit India has is that we have a huge local market. So not only do people serve as people who will do research and who will be building these companies, and we have a critical mass of it, but we do have local markets where we can sell these products. We can experiment whether these products are working or not and take them to and commercialize them. And lastly, we are again in a new world where technology has touched all of us. Technology has touched us not only through cell phones, but through healthcare, through MRI machines and EEG machines and so on. We are in India, if today you will tell the public that the government wants to invest in science and technology, they will. It is something which is given. People believe in the power of science and technology to have made a change in their life. And it is different from 30 years back when, probably even if there was political will, they would believe that they would not have the people's support. So today we can easily create a public discourse around the benefits of science and technology and why the government should invest and do more. So it is the most right time for India to invest in scientific research. Of course, we have had a setback with COVID and with the economy contracting and so on. But I think the one of the two things which I think this COVID has taught us is one, the value of scientific research, which now everyone would even appreciate more. And second, the number of scientists which we have seen on the television screen have been heartening. And that's a point which I make in the book, that we don't see scientists as public intellectuals, and that has been momentarily changed by COVID. And if we can continue to do that, that would be a great benefit for the country. So our economy is at a size and the country is at a maturity, and this is exactly the right time to invest and develop the science ecosystem. We couldn't have probably said the same 20 years back or 30 years back when in the 90s, but we can say that now we have a developed industry and a developed economy for scientific research, and that's where India should be going. But why do I say now or never? Because innovation is at an exponential speed. If you see what China has done in the last 20 years, we need to be very fast now. Otherwise, we very soon will be so left far behind that we'll not be able to catch up in innovation with the rest of the world. So we need to act now. The third point which I'll make is that science must be the basis of our national development. On the TV, we debate so many questions every day, and there are all sorts of viewpoints, but there are many questions for India's development which are best answered by science. And this could only happen if we take a scientific approach to answering these questions. And when I say a scientific approach, it means, everyone can have a viewpoint and opinion, but these are statements and facts which are backed by evidence, and those are scientific. So we really need to hear from the scientists on some of the most pressing issues in the country. Both the government and the public needs to be hearing from the scientists rather than having multiple opinions. The multiple opinions are always good in a democracy, but we need that objective view, which is backed by evidence, if we want to be able to predict that the answer to the question is right and it will lead to development. For example, we need to clean the Ganga, and that can be totally poised as a scientific question, or cleaning the environment is a scientific question, and we need to be including scientists on that. And to be able to do that, two things are necessary. First, we need a critical mass of great researchers in the country, and the second, we need to be able to connect them to the public through various kinds of media and so on. One thing, again, which I mentioned in the book is that if you look at India, there are very few scientists who are public intellectuals. We have entrepreneurs as public intellectuals, we have businessmen as public intellectuals, of course, we have politicians as public intellectuals. But we don't see as many scientists, and that is something which we really, really need to change if we want, to be honest, India's development of science in India. So three out of the six reasons which I mentioned in the book. But to summarize, if we want to continue our economic growth, if we want our nation to continue to get answers to its many, many, many pressing problems, we need to rely on science. And so in one statement, what I summarize this whole thing is that for continued economic development and for sustained social development of the country, being a leader in science is a necessary condition for India. And as I said, I might be preaching to the chorus here, but if this is the message we need to take loud and clear to whatever ways of dissemination we have to the public, and create that public narrative which will force the hands of the whole ecosystem to do better in science. One question I ask people often is that how often do we demand our government of saying that we need to be a scientific superpower? We do demand on them that we need to be an economic superpower. We do demand on them that we want to be a defense superpower. But we need to start demanding from all stakeholders that we want to be a scientific superpower. Having said that, it is very important for India to be investing in this area. And by the way, I think all economies which come to this size start investing in research. Let's just start understanding where does India stand in research and innovation today. Uh, so if we look at disruptive research coming out of India, not disruptive research, but just research impact of India, which is counted in the number of citations, we stand 12th, whereas the USA stands first and China starts second. The very interesting fact of China is that in the last 30 years, from a copycat economy, they have changed themselves into an innovation economy. And they've done sustained changes to do that. So if many of you believe that China is still that country which copies stuff and doesn't believe in IP and their whole economy runs in creating cheap replicas of what the West has made, that's changed. Uh, this is going a little deeper into stuff. If we look at ourselves in percentage of citations, we are 10% of USA. Sorry, is there a comment? Oh, okay, I'll continue. So if we are 10% of USA, we are 21% of China. And sometimes when we talk to academics in India, one of their complaints is that don't look at us in terms of citations because there's a bias in citations. So in the book, I compare this with also the number of papers we publish in top conferences. And if you see, the gap is not very, very different. So if you look at India compared with China, even if we look at papers in top conferences, that is 10%. With compared to China, we are at 27% and so on. So roughly the numbers remain the same. If you look at disruptive research, these are papers which are very highly cited, and some of the stuff Dr. Ramasami was talking about leapfrogging research. It could be like discovering the helical structure of DNA or invention of deep learning and artificial intelligence. Then the gap is even further. So China 7x of us, and USA is 15x of us. I just skipped this slide. And if you see similarly the impact on the startup ecosystem, and this is a little bit dated data, this is from 14 to 16. And I looked at MIT Technology Review brings out the world's smartest companies every year. And USA has 105. This is data from 14 to 16. China has 14 and India has none. And now I believe there have been one or two of them which have crept into that list. But the larger point which I'm making is that if we want to build world-class companies which are highly differentiated, which create huge economic value, and which are one of their type in the world, they need to be backed by a scientific research ecosystem. Until we don't have it, just investing in the startup ecosystem will not take us there. So if I see this is to give you a picture on where India stands both on research and translating that research into economic value and public good. And I would not say we are doing bad, we are doing reasonably good, but I would say that we are, as compared to the size of our economy, as compared to our national aspirations, we are way down than where we should be in scientific research. So what are the problems with our research ecosystem? So let me start with the first piece out here. So research is as good as researchers, right? You can do anything and everything, but it finally depends on how good is the quality of researchers and what kind of people are going into doing research in a country. It is like teaching is finally as good as teachers. You can do as many interventions, but till you don't have good teachers, teaching will not be good. The first point which we need to get right in the country is to get a critical mass of high quality researchers. If I make comparisons with other countries, and while the United States have close to 5 lakh high performing researchers, India's count is just 2,700. So USA is 17x as much as we are in high performing researchers, and China is 7x. As such. So we just don't have critical mass of high quality researchers. The point I'm trying to make is that we do have pockets of scientific excellence, and I'm not denying that, be it government labs or be it universities, but there are not enough of them that we have a critical mass of them where we can, the ecosystem starts working on themselves. And I just, here at this diagram in the bottom, I've compared the number of faculty members which are in different universities. And if you see, India is hovering at 500, USA is hovering at 2,000, and China is hovering at 3,000. And Tsinghua today rubs shoulders with MIT when it looks at global rankings and their number of paper in nature and science and so on. So not only do we have lesser number of institutions, our institutions are smaller, and they need to be really scaled up way, way a lot if we want to be competing with some of the largest countries. This diagram, and I'll not go very deep in this, but basically what I'm trying to say in this diagram is that if you even look at the total count of researchers, the proportion of good researchers which we have is lower than other countries. So here, this line with the blue dots is India, and you see that the India's curve is at the bottom. This says that if I look at the total researchers in the country, there are a lot more who write papers which get no citation. So 55% of the papers which are written by our researchers get no citation. And if you look at a US and UK, that number is 35%. So it's not only about quantity, it is about the quality of people who are going into research and how productive they are in research. And we need to not only improve the number of people, but the quality of people who are in research and be able to make them more productive. Why do we not have good people in research? Again, my one line summary to that is that research in India is a lackluster career, right? If I ask people in school or colleges and ask them that how many of you want to do research in India, that number is very, very small. Versus if I ask them that how many of you want to be an entrepreneur or a businessman or work in a consulting company and so on. For the book, I did certain surveys, and I found out that only 9% Indian PhD students in India want to return to India immediately. Most of the people who go out to do a PhD don't want to come back to India to become a faculty or drive research here in India. And the people who want to come back, for 70%, the reason is not the market. It's not because they think they can do best research in India. It is their love for India or family reasons, right? So people have given me reasons like that. It was given that I'll always come back to India. So, but such reasons will never create a critical mass of high quality researchers who are coming back. The other problem is not, so the first one is more well known, which we call brain drain, but the other one is brain imbalance. So it is not only that people want to go out, but people want to go to the industry or do a startup rather than doing research and becoming a researcher or a research faculty. Right? As I say here, only 20% are interested in doing research in India when we surveyed top undergrads in India. And of course, we need people going in industry as well, and we need people going in starting startups as well. But as we see today, that is skewed more towards the industry and startups, and we need to make the ecosystem, shift the ecosystem in a way that more people today among our top students want to go into research. Why are people not interested in research? If you see today, there's very poor selling of a research career, and there's little awareness. Our survey said that 75% students say that their professors never discussed any research paper. Only 5% report that anyone has pitched them a MS or a PhD program. So when you go to colleges, there'll be like companies lining up and startups lining up and entrepreneur clubs and so on. But if you see anyone talking to them about an MS or PhD program, that's just 5%, right? 42% India PhD students in USA say that that someone had come to pitch them a research position in India. More than 50% say no one pitched them. So the awareness of research career is very poor in India, and our institutions do very little selling as on today to get people into the research career. People don't think there are a lot of professional benefits. 46% of our students think that less than 20% professors are really good. 57% think that conference funding, travel funding is hard to get, where the government has done a lot of interventions. It can be done better, but still there's a gap. 75% people feel that USA is the place for research and it's not India. Then there are problems on personal benefits. I mean, one elephant in the room which people don't want to generally address is the salaries for professors, which I think is criminally low, and they've been guided by the pay commission, and we need to make our institutions autonomous to be able to decide the salaries they're giving to their professors. Starting professor in computer science in India gets in an IIT 10 lakhs. And I think in a similar person in industry can get 40 or 50 lakhs. So the gap is just too large. I don't expect academia to be paying as much as industry, but the salaries as we see today are criminally low, and they need to be deregularized to change. So the big first point is that we need to figure out how do we get high quality researchers in the ecosystem and make the research career, which today looks very lackluster, to make it something which becomes a, 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 a career of choice for our top 20% students. And that would need that they have better exposure to what is research, what are papers, and so on. And we also improve the career itself, which doesn't look very lucrative. And the whole thesis of the book is that you have to model these things so that it creates a market for people to get into research. You cannot force anyone to do research, and even if you force someone to do research, they'll do a bad job. So it should be market forces which pick them there. The second big point is that is that India liberalized its business environment back in the 90s, in the beginning of 90s, but it has not liberalized its research ecosystem. Like someone put it very nicely to me that we have we have unshackled Lakshmi. It's time we unshackle Saraswati. And if we unshackle both Lakshmi and Saraswati, no one can stop India from becoming a world power. So, what do I mean by saying that we need to liberalize our research ecosystem? This is a point which I made earlier. But currently, the science ecosystem is very tightly controlled by government regulations. The government rules control what kind of salaries are there, what kind of promotions are there, what are the rules for promotions and benefits, and so on. Faculty report a lot of bureaucracy in getting new funds or equipment. For example, if you want to buy something more than $1,000, you need to have a tender committee, you need to get bids, and something which would take 24 hours in the US to buy would take 3 to 6 months in India to get. And we need to remove these bureaucratic hurdles which have been created due to a tight regulation around our research institutions. And this is, if you think about it, this is similar to how the industry used to function pre-90s, where there was this whole idea of license Raj, and you had to take permission for pretty much everything to do. And if we really want to, if we want to really change this, we need to give autonomy to our institutions, and we need to give autonomy to our individual researchers, and make things really easy for them to do, and let them make their own decisions and tightly controlling them. When we do that, whenever you give someone autonomy and independence, at the same time you have to make them accountable. And what you mean by making them accountable is to have incentives for performing and disincentives for not performing. Right? Today, there's little incentives for non-performing. You can be a researcher who's very low performing and continue to be in a university for the rest of your life and have a small differential in salary and so on with your peers. Compare this with the system in US, where there's this system of tenure, and the professors have to really show that they are really, really good and productive in the first 7 to 10 years of their career. Otherwise, the university lets them go. And universities like MIT let 40 to 50% of their professors to go, creating a very, very performance-driven ecosystem. I'm not saying India should copy the tenure system in the US, but today the incentives and disincentives which are there at an institutional level or a faculty level are not that high. There's not enough incentives for performers. In the US, if you are a performer, that would mean you get a much higher salary, you'll get more money for your research, you'll get more decision power, and they'll make you multiply your research success. Well, that doesn't happen. There are a few cases that happens in India, but doesn't happen as a system. So we need to balance this autonomy and accountability and get both. And there's a simple liberal policy principles which we need to get. So currently, the way the system is bureaucratic and tightly regulated, and low on accountability. Where we have to take it is that we have to make it more independent and more accountable. India lacks collaboration within and globally, and this is a point which, towards the end of his presentation, Dr. Ramasami also made a couple of times about these verticalized silos will not work. Everything, the research and innovation and translational research and innovation needs multiple collaborations. And what are these collaborations? The first is collaboration with the global community. Researchers thrive by interacting with other researchers across the world with different ideas. Again, India is very low if you look at the interaction with global research. There's some data which was culled from public reports. But if you compare, let's say, one of the IIT with the number of external talks that's happening, it would be 40, 50 a year. And if you compare it with an MIT or a Tsinghua University in China, where data was publicly available, it's like 10x. 500 people visiting them every year to give talks and collaborate and so on. And part of the problem here is also this whole issue around travel money. I mean, I was surprised how many researchers told me that the top hindrance they have is how travel money is today allocated in India. And that goes back to the policy around bureaucratic control and over-regulation. Similarly, if you see, on average, it would be 1 in 2 faculty which would do international visits and 1 in 5 PhD students who do an international visit. One of the students in our survey who was a PhD student from Indian Institute of Sciences wrote that there's an interesting dichotomy that our faculty says that we should write 3 good top international papers to do our PhD, but we get funding for doing 1 international visit, and then we might get it for 1 more, but we have to fight for it. So if we really want to be world class, we need to have this collaboration between global scientists and India, and we need to make that into a tighter connection, which is not there today. The other important point is about commercialization of research. And that's what really leads to the benefit of research happen on the economy and public. And again, if you see, we are minuscule in our performance on being able to commercialize our research as compared to an MIT or a Stanford. And a lot of our institutions still don't have industry license programs, professional industry license programs, which would connect them to the industry. The rot there is deeper. I won't go into that right now, but really, we just need to get the industry and research institutions together if we really want to disrupt innovation. And there are quite a few ways of that. And today, India doesn't do very well. In fact, PhD students rate industry interaction lowest among the multiple parameters we ask them to rate the research programs on. This is another interesting point, and this again goes back to what Dr. Ramasami was talking about: leapfrog innovation and more risky ideas and so on. And it is interesting. I mean, this is something which I don't have data on, and it can easily become controversial. But Indian researchers do not ask broad, bold, original questions. Again, when I make this statement, I don't mean that no Indian researcher asks them, but as a system, it is not encouraged that we ask broad questions. And one of the problems is what I have understood is what I talked about before. Our bar of a good PhD or a good faculty is did you publish in a top international conference? Rather than that, I think the best research is done by passionate individuals who are passionate about a question and then take it into make it into a research question and answer it. And this again goes back to the point of being in silos. So what has happened a lot in Indian academia is that they sit in silos within Indian academia, and then they've worked on questions which have come out of the West and then done tinkering on that. What I am saying is that they need to go closer to the problem and understand the problem by linking with the society, with the industry, and so on. And that's what would lead to new original questions. So it goes back to that point of the academia being in silos. And when I say academia being in silos, the industry is also as much to blame, which is not creating this collaboration. And the other piece which is interesting is that we need a systems approach to research. So a lot of times what we see in India is that math research will be more respected than building a system. And that is something which we need to change. And again, I'll not delve deep into this, but the big picture is that we need to break these silos, and our researchers should be asking original questions, which will happen when they are proximal to the problem, proximal to the society, proximal to the industry. And the aim is not to publish a paper in an international conference which tinkers on a problem or a question which someone is asking. So we really need to raise the bar. So I don't think professors should say that you should get 3 international papers and that will be a good PhD. They should rather say that you need to think of an original question which you are passionate about, which you'd like to solve, and do some original contribution in it. So the last point, uh, and probably the most important point, is that India needs to invest in universities and in excellence. And what do I mean out here? So there is this interesting data and phenomena that if you look at the 1950s, uh, in most countries, there were more people in government research labs than there were in universities doing research. So if you look India historically and the first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, it was not that he did not see scientific research as important for the country. He thought it was very important for the country and was passionate about it. But the way the model was thought of then was that their government research labs which do research and their universities which do dissemination of knowledge. So creation of knowledge is with research labs and dissemination of knowledge is with universities. And that's how the Indian model got structured. And that's how a lot of models got structured across the world during those times. So if you see in the 1980s, if you see the ratio of people in government labs versus in universities, these are researchers, it was like 1.66 for USA, it was 1.25 in UK. But if you see these ratios now, in the USA, that ratio is 4. That means that there are 4 times more research personnel in universities than in government labs. In UK, it's 20. But if you see
Mr. Varun Agarwal, kindly unmute. Somebody muted you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I'll Mr. Mohan, I'll wrap in
Yes,
5
sir.
minutes. That would be time.
No problem, sir. Time is not a constraint.
Okay. Uh, so basically, till you don't build great research programs in universities and PhD programs, how would you get people to learn research, right? Universities and PhD programs are where people really learn how to do research and become professors. And this model of PhD students and professors has been very, very productive across the world in doing great research. And this is one thing which has not changed in India. India still spends a lot of its money in government personnel. And that's something which, according to me, should change. And it's not, I'll be honest, it's not something new, which has been also talked about by the Kothari Commission in the 80s and in the 80s about creating these world-class universities to do stuff. Again, this is a comparison of some of the top universities across the world. And if you would just see the scale of investment, scale of number of people in these universities, India, becomes 10x lower than the rest of them. So this goes back to the question of critical mass of high performing institutions and faculty. We do have uh, good and great institutions right now, but we need to scale them 5 to 10x if we really want to be competing in the global ecosystem and having India as a country of 1 billion people. And if we want to be able to serve those 1 billion people, our size and scale is much smaller when we look at the quality institutions. So these are all the things, and there's a small fun graphic here, but this is a summary of what I think. I think that Indian science is a sleeping giant. It's a country with huge potential. There's some people who've made comments like India doesn't do well in science because India is superstitious people and all that nonsense. I see that as akin to saying that when Indian economy was growing to 3% or 4% in the 80s, someone termed it as the Hindu rate of growth, saying that, oh, Hindus are otherworldly people. And that's why India doesn't grow as fast as it should. And then we just liberalized the economy and we started growing at 8% and 9%. I think it is totally same for science. It is not, Indian people have a huge scientific temperament. We have been a knowledge economy and have done innovation for ages, not now. It is just the policy and the institutional structures which we need to change. And the giant of Indian science will wake up. And how do we do this? The first thing is that the government needs to make it a priority. As I said, that if all of us can make an effort on saying that this should be among the first priorities of the government and the nation, that will help. It's not going to be, we'll need 10 to 20 years of reform in multiple places to make this happen. So we'll have to be patient and invest in it and stay with it. We need autonomous research-oriented institutions, so both autonomous and accountable, and collaborating and competing with each other and having scale. Our companies need to become innovative, work with PhD programs very closely. One thing which I keep saying is that 20 years back, the IT industry started working with the undergrad programs and tried hard to, bring them up to speed with what the industry requirements. It's time to make those same connections in PhD programs now. And all of us need to ask original questions and come with original solutions. As a country, we need to do that. How will this happen? I think there's need to be a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The top-down is political and institutional will, and for change in policy, get greater autonomy. And in one line, I'll again say liberalize the science ecosystem. Think of how we liberalized the economy in the 90s and do the same with the science ecosystem. A bottom-up approach is to create the public awareness around this, create that interest and discourse. Or what I was earlier saying, that how many of us demand of a government that India should be world-class in science? How many of us think that research is cool? So we need to move the discourse from India needs research is cool, and I need to do research. Right? And middle of this is where we need to build capacity for science and get everyone together. I'll talk quickly about two initiatives which I have been involved with in this level. So one thing there's this nice think tank in Delhi called Center for Civil Society, is globally very well rated. And we are working together to create a small policy group, which we are calling CRISP, Center for Reimagining Innovation and Science Policy. This will be a small policy group of 3-4 people, which will actively work on science policy issues in the country and see how we can get liberal principles into the science ecosystem, and hopefully work closely with the government and actors in science ecosystem. And as far as I know, this is a virgin field. There are very few or hardly any science policy groups in the country. So there are groups around health, there are groups around education who do advocacy with the government, but we are forming CRISP to do advocacy around science and have this small group of people which look at both short-term and long-term reforms, which can be done at a policy level to improve or reimagine the innovation in science policy. Right now, we are looking at hiring a director for CRISP, the person who will run it. We are looking for someone with science background who has great interest in policy. So I just thought I'll bring this up to this group. If anyone's interested in CRISP or this position, please feel free to go to the website of CCS and look at it in more details. You can also write to me if you need more information. But this is our small effort in trying to work with the government to make a policy reform in science, both short term and long term. The other thing which we did last year and we're going to repeat this year is the bottom up approach to create a public discourse around science, and we created the India Science Festival, where we got 50 plus speakers from across the world. These were scientists from MIT, Harvard, Yale, the IITs, ISCRs, and even Adobe and so on, who talked about science policy, who talked about AI, who talked about neuroscience, who talked about black holes and so on. We got exhibits from around the world like AI art, brain-controlled balls, brain-controlled helicopters. We had an AI-driven driverless car, which is being built by a startup in Bangalore. We had workshops. We did something for the PhD students and competitively chose them to give a public talk on their thesis, which was also very, very successful. And the whole idea of India Science Fest is to start a public engagement of science and get scientists and students face-to-face, make them more aware about the science ecosystem, but also get scientists at one place to be able to discuss Indian science. This was the rough architecture where at the middle was core science, but then we saw how science interacts with history, art, social impact policy. And the way we did it was through talks, roundtables, workshops, games, experiments, and exhibits. We had 13,000 participants who came. This was done at ISA Pune. 74% people rated it 8 out of 10. 43% said they met a scientist for the first time in their life. And I think the whole initiative kind of showed people that India can do in science. So Professor Kambampati from Arizona State University, who was also the past president for AAAI, he made this remark that it requires a certain level of delusion to even think of putting together a festival of this size, let alone pulling it off. So we were very happy with it. And the next, we are having the next edition in January, which is India Science Month Online. It is online this time. And we're going to again have a set of talks, many more workshops around science illustration, science storytelling, and so on. Very interesting panel discussions, and a lot more competitions and games around science fiction writing, presenting your thesis, and so on and so forth. So please check out indiasciencefest.org if you're interested in the science festival, and please come and hear the talk. That's what I will have for today. Thanks everyone for the patience, and thanks again, Mr. Dr. Mohan, and thanks Dr. Ramasami for this opportunity and these comments.
Good evening, Professor Ramasami sir and Mr. Varun Agarwal sir. So, we had a wonderful session on science and technology research in India. So, Professor T. Ramasami in his address elaborated about the ringside view of research in India. What are all the cultural changes in research we have to adopt? What are all the global directions of policy discourse for science? The evolutionary directions for global science and technology policies? Multiple research directions in modern world? Global R&D intensity map? Long-term sustainability of scientific research? R&D directions for gainful use? And the current global research directions, etc. And Mr. Varun Agarwal has elaborated how can India lead science and technology in the coming years, how to create a large economic value, and what are the exponential speed for innovation, and what are the problems with research ecosystem, etc. He has elaborated. Sir, we have a couple of questions from participants. So I will read one by one, and I request you to kindly answer them. What are the basic casualty factors for India's failures according to you, sir? It is Professor T. Ramasami. What are the basic casualty factors for India's failures according to you? Any policy aberrations? And what could be the strategy for at least catching up with AI?
Well, I have never said failures. Okay. Therefore, this question itself, casualty failures, I don't accept that in the first principle. Right. I think we have to look at this more philosophically than getting into all these nitty-gritty details. Fundamentally, what we have accomplished is a lot more than what we need to do, agree, but we can do a lot more. Nobody says we have to arrive at a destination. I'm not going to go back and give an answer, we have failed in something. If you're going to talk about policy, India is the first country which had a scientific policy resolution among the developing units in 1958. Even the US formed a National Science Foundation much later. Therefore, let us not talk about policy as a failure. Please understand, policy is a trigger. The scientific policy resolution of India was just 1 3/4 page. No policy can become a dictum. Therefore, on the government side, I would plead with both hands closed. There's a strong political will for support of science in this country. However, translation of that will into action has many other ground reality problems. And those problems are being overcome slowly. When I went to Delhi in 2006, the total R&D funding for the 6 departments together, space, atomic energy, SAR, DST, DBT, and Earth Sciences, was 25,400 crores. Okay. That was moved to 1,27,000 crores in the 12th plan, and there's a 9-fold advancement. Therefore, please understand, it is not a failure. We don't have critical mass of scientists in this country to be able to bring about the changes that Varun talked about. The total, if you show the plot, he himself pointed out the total full-time equivalent scientists in this country is 220 per million population as of last year. And now China, that number per million population is 1,400. Now we talk about the number of scientists, full-time equivalent scientists in this country is 2.2 lakhs. Today 2 lakhs. They have 22 lakhs. Fundamentally, you can't grow scientists overnight. It's a job which is not filled up by vacancy. You have to create people who have passion. And that process, that Inspire scheme that we established, is not matched by anybody else in the world. That's what we did, put 4,400 crores in the program. Therefore, my sincere request to all of you, don't look at failure of India. Look at what we can do a lot more. And I would not like to give this answer in this particular question if you don't mind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. The next question is, how far the world is ahead in the field of AI than India? Not related to...
Let me give you an answer.
Yes.
In many domains, we have far less number of scientists. Critical mass is very low. It is not that for any particular domain, we are fairly, in terms of knowledge, we have one or two individuals who are very good. But India's need is a lot more than individual needs. Therefore, our number of people in any domain, not only artificial intelligence, any domain is lower than what we need. What we need, as Varun pointed out, we need to have a critical mass to meet our requirements. And it is not just one domain, there's been all other domains as well. And he pointed out IISc has 450 faculty, and that is supposed to be our elite institution. And he says that, look, this is the 1/10 of another university in China. Therefore, the critical mass needs to be built, even in the area of the artificial intelligence. This is my personal view. It is not the knowledge gap. It is an ability to translate that knowledge into a national kind of critical mass. And we have a problem across. You see, when we talk about the salaries of scientists being low, please understand, you take a salary of a professor of any university, cost to country, and divide it by per capita GDP. Per capita GDP is 30.6 times. Indians are supporting one professor. Now, in America, a professor will get 2.5 times the per capita GDP. Therefore, there is a requirement, the large population that we have, to really allocate resources in a manner in which priorities can be matched. Fundamentally, the per scientist investment as per the World Bank data, because Varun with a lot of evidence-based data, I talk about his evidence. If you talk about the data of the World Bank, it will talk to India is the 6th largest investor into research with a $60.5 billion as a purchase for parity term. 2 lakh scientists, $332,000 with the money invested by the United States today per scientist. So we cannot double the investment unless we have a number of scientists growing. And the scientists cannot be grown in the tree. They don't grow on trees. We have to create them. I think what is important is not what the government can do, what institutions will have to do. And there is a lot of bottom-up actions that Varun talked about have to happen. And they require autonomy, they require accountability. And that is given. I think the resources is not a major issue. The major issue is how to convert that aspiration that all of you are speaking today into a reality for this country. I think I'm very happy. You see, I belong to a generation of deprivation syndrome. Soon after we were born, and we are talking about this is not available, that is not available. Then came a generation of comparison syndrome. Compare America, compare England, compare now China. Then there is a generation of globalization trust. Talking about world is, we talked about Vasudeva Kudumbakam, they talked about world is a marketplace. And world is a family The world as a marketplace is a huge transition, emotional transition. Today, I'm very happy to hear aspiration. The generation that we are now seeing is an aspirational generation. I think we should not curb them, we should liberate them. And how do we liberate? And the liberation process is facilitation, mentoring. It requires lots of ground activities. As somebody who had occupied this position for 8 years, okay, in Delhi, I felt the pain of not seeing enough number of people converting all of our brilliant ideas into actions. My friend talked about people are doing research, but extensions. They are not original. What's the point of doing something that's not original? Fundamentally, let us ask the question, how do we as a science community speak for science? How do we as a science community develop the science? How do we as a science community dream globally visible and competitive? And that's what is important. In the last 15 years, 2006 to 14, okay, today, when I went to Delhi, India 15th rank in publications in the Scopus database, and we were 15th rank in the Web of Science database. Today, we are moved up in the ladder in number of publications. That's not enough. You require quantum and quality. Agree. But without quantum, you will not get quality. You need to have both. And therefore, we are seeing the transition, and the transition phase, you see a middle point, you don't see where we are ending. And I want to finish, hopefully, that maybe 10 years from today, if we sustain our action and work together, we will arrive where we want to arrive. That's what we need to do. I will leave it at that stage.
No, and I think, sorry, I'll make a quick comment. And I think it's very well articulated. I pretty much agree on everything with what Dr. Ramasami said. And, the bigger issue is critical mass of researchers. Today it is AI, tomorrow neuroscience will be disrupted, biotech will be disrupted, and we'll have the same issue. So what we see in AI is a symptom of the larger science ecosystem. And we need, of course, a lot more resources for science. Having said that, I do think that the resources which we are putting in science, the other lacuna which I see in the ecosystem is that they should be given more competitively, and we should be using them to promote excellence, right? So one question we can ask is that the money which we are spending in science today, can it bear better fruit than what it bears today, right? And I'll give you an example that what I had alluded to when the Kothari Commission said, and this was 20, 30 years back, that we should create 5 world-class universities. The Parliament shot it down saying it is elitist. How can you accumulate resources in these 5 universities and create them? And I think research works totally the opposite. You have to accumulate resources in excellence. If you will try to do it in a socialist way that gives resources equally to everyone, you will never be high performing. So you need to accumulate those resources in high quality individuals and institutions, and government has to create that market so that there is, and that goes back to the point of accountability which I was making. So accountability needs to be accumulating resources in where the country is performing and individuals and institutions are performing, and we need to create that virtuous cycle, and that's how science will go.
Thank you, sir. Next question. How can we change parents' mindset who wants their children, that is students, like me, to work for a monthly paid job rather than on research and innovation?
I can make 2 quick comments and then I'll let Professor Ramasami say, but there's a lot of economic opportunity in research today as well. People don't know that, right? And I think the first thing is awareness. You can make, like, there's this PMRF scheme which has increased the stipend of PhD students. The salaries may not be very high, but researchers can make a lot of money on consulting and so on. So if you are really passionate about research and want to solve interesting problems, I do think that the situation in India has changed from the last 20, 30 years, and we have a much more better economic return. People don't know about it. So I think just making them aware, we can do better, but even making people aware of what we have today can change mindsets of people and get more people into research.
Sir Ramasami, sir, your comment.
You see, you are asking a question to a parent. I never seen a brahmachari asking a question about a parent's right. Having said that, let me also tell you, and now our match Varun and I will speak about science and the parachute. Please understand, it is one of the very exquisite and elegant activities of the country. Among the various socio-economic activities, science and research is a minuscule sized activity. If you have 2 lakh scientists in this country, 2.5 lakhs, let me say, 4% will retire every year. So you're getting 10,000 jobs. Whole country will create 10,000 jobs. Now, which parent will go back and say, you make money out of this position? Please understand, science does not require people who cannot change Indian science if they are going to talk about what is the physical income I'm going to get out of science. There's a tremendous psychological income, psychic income. And the psychic income today, let me tell you very honestly, is being felt by families already. And the number of people coming to Inspire Scholarship, which we have announced, for example, I tell you the top 1% performance of the people who in the school go into a PhD in India, went to the top 1% performers, 94,000 people have availed the scholarship. If 94,000 people avail that 1% quota and they become a scientist in this country, they are looking at a different change of quality space, which Varun was talking about. Please don't try to understand, change the mindset of the whole community, because that's not required. If all of them become scientists, believe me, I have no jobs to give. Therefore, the question is, how do we size our requirement? And SMT requirement is not a volume, it's a value. How do you create that value chain for science? I think we are doing reasonably well. It is not fair. Now that you mentioned this, just before we started this program, I had a program called Flyers for the students of Leather Technology branch of Anna University. It is about startups. Large number of students want to start startups. Therefore, if the families do not prevent them from becoming risky enterprise, it is service to science. Let us not talk about just becoming scientists in the science.
So next question, sir. India lacks in revolutionary. What is the reason? Because most of the brilliant Indian people have positioned high in foreign countries in research, and more innovation are done by youngsters, but not everyone are succeeded. What is the reason behind it?
See, any innovation comes with a high amount of risk of failures. In fact, in Varun's topic, he talks about respect failures. His book says that respect failures. Here, any failure is a social stigma. It is punished. If you are punishing a failure, innovation cannot happen. Innovation comes from the failures. The reason why people are going there is because the innovation system is able to respect failures and accept failures as a way of discovering new things. And that's a social behavior. It cannot be governmental change. It has to be an operational process. Varun may speak about it even better.
No, I agree to whatever you said. There are a lot of questions, so maybe we can just circle more to the questions and take a few more of them, but totally in agreement.
Yes, thank you.
So next question to Mr. Varun Agarwal, sir. In this era of globalization and decentralization, collaborative research of India resident researchers with foreign resident India-born researchers will improve research productivity, quality and quantity in India. So I see the slides on collaboration now. So
as I already said, that is much needed. And I think there have been a lot of efforts from institutions and governments towards that. And as we talk, there's a Web Hub Summit which is going on by the government of India to bring the Indian academics from outside on a common platform. So much needed. We've been, in the last 10 years, we have improved efforts on it, but we need to still scale it to 10x more for where we want to go.
Thank you, sir. The next question. I am a doctorate. As of now, I am not connected with any academic institution. Is it possible for me to publication or presentation in conference my conference my work as an individual because all publications are asking for affiliation.
I think you can publish as an individual. No one will stop you from doing that. If your work goes through peer review and is published. Of course, this is not the topic of discussion today, but this is what my thought on it.
You see, the work of C.V. Raman was done as an individual. It was not done through an institution. Okay? The first paper of C.V. Raman was published as student from Presidency College. He believed that the research will not give him enough money. So he became an assistant accountant general, passed civil service exam, been assistant accountant general, did research. And then he went and told Sarkar, if you give me a place to work, I'll get no prize in 5 years, even in 7 years. Therefore, fundamentally, working as a researcher, I think it is an individual pursuit. I don't think anybody can prevent if the quality of the thinking process is sufficient. But talking about supporting government money for travel, that may be asking for certain affiliations because they have to deal with the financial processes. But I believe there are philanthropic agencies which can still support. I believe it is possible.
Thank you, sir. Next question is for Mr. Varun Agarwal, sir. What do you suggest an individual's role for improvement in science and technology?
No, that's a very interesting question. And as I said, I think being an informed citizen and demanding all institutions for India doing better in science is number one. Number two is to start looking at evidence-based scientific answers to your questions and demanding that. And as an individual, you can, depending on what you want to do, you can do a number of things if you really want to. I mean, India can use a lot of people and a lot of help in building science for India. If you're interested, you can become a part of India Science Festival. You can look at science policy as a discipline. So it's a virgin field. We have a lot to do, and we still need to have a lot more public engagement around science.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Management schools, IIMs, etc. have very limited interest in doing basic scientific research because of very nature of the setup of these institutions. Can something be done to change?
I think IIMs have become more interested than before in doing research. And I think it is the question, the part of it is the same thing which I think that traditionally, at least 20 years back, institutions saw themselves as more disseminating knowledge than creating knowledge. And that has been changing over time. And I see a lot of change happening in that in the last 10 to 15 years. But we need to do a lot more on it. And but as far as I know, IIMs have become a lot more interested in research, and if you see their research output, it is consistently growing. But my general submission is that we need all of these institutions need to do a lot more and have a lot more scale and see themselves as they see education. They need to see research in the same light as they see education, if not lesser, if not more.
Thank you, sir. Next question. How to cut down and channelize the prime train for Indian research?
So I think, and Dr. Ramasami can add, an Inspire program was one of the programs to do that. But we really need to make the research career in India lucrative, and it's not. And to Dr. Ramasami's point earlier, that we don't want to make everyone a researcher, and I don't think that's the point at all. The point is that 10-20% people of the country, we need more of them going into a research career. So when our top of class people, more of them higher proportion of them start going into research, we'll be able to improve the quality of research we have. And for that, we need to do multiple steps, some of which the government is doing, but a lot more to make to better sell the research career abroad, to make it, I'm repeating, money is not a bad word. So we need to make it economically lucrative for people, and we need to make it professionally lucrative for people. So like one of the persons in our survey said that US is the place to do research. We need to, and today people will say China is the place to do research. India has to slowly aspire to be at the place where people start saying India is the place to do research. To be very, very honest, if I'll be sitting in a global forum there'll be very little attention on India from a point of view of research. And I tell this story that, once I was in Boston and day one I was at Harvard at a Harvard conference, and everyone was talking about India and saying what will happen to the Indian economy and how it will change the balance of the world. The next day I was at MIT and everyone was talking about China and no one was talking about India when they were talking about scientific research. So India needs to really graduate in becoming a global player in research and we feel like that.
I'll add a small comment on this brain drain issue.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about today, I'm talking about 30 years ago. I didn't believe in the word brain drain. I talked about brain circulation. And you can keep a brain without proper use, you can drain the brain. Therefore, fundamentally, that time when we graduated from our undergraduate programs, BTECs, 84% of, let me say, IITians went abroad, didn't come back. When I was in the government in 2013, I did the same study. 84% of the IITians did not leave the country. What happened? Primarily, if there's a bright mind, the bright mind is not challenged, given only satisfied by money alone. There has to be an ecosystem which should be receiving that bright mind and give the challenge and opportunity for them to function. And it turns out, at the time when we left the college, there was not enough absorption capacity in this country to be able to take the bright brain, challenge them adequately. And I am very positive in making a statement. In the current ecosystem, there's a sufficient number of enterprises, entrepreneurial systems to absorb these bright minds. That's the reason why people are not leaving. Now, in my family, we did 9 of us did PhD, 7 of us did abroad, 6 of us are back in this country. Okay? And 3 of us are Patna Prize winners. And the people who came here at that time came here not because the system was giving us anything. It was because we truly believe, if you want to be recognized somewhere, it has to be only in your own country. You can be a second-rate citizen in a first-rate country. I think it's better to be a first-rate citizen in your own country, in a second-rate country. Therefore, the people who choose not to be here, they chose not to be here because of what they are. And I believe they are a second-rate citizen in a first-rate country. Therefore, let me not talk about brain drain in the context in which we call brain circulation.
Thank you very much, sir. So that's all question from participants. Now it is over to Mr. H.R. Mohan, sir, for further proceedings. Mohan, sir?
Yeah. So it was a wonderful presentation, I can say that. So it was excellently handled, debated, and Dr. Ramasami, as usual, he was very punchy. Of course, he has made the global instead of just localizing, though I was mentioning that it is going to be India specific, mainly because of the topic that we have given as India specific. So thank you very much for making it a global perspective. What needs to be done in the area of scientific research. Thank you very much for your wonderful thoughts sharing with you, sir. Thank you very much. And coming to Dr. Mr. Varun, as usual, you have been very expressive. In fact, the entire presentation was data-based presentation. All along, you have been substantiating your findings with reference to some data, and you have been quite vocal and critical on what is happening in Indian context, and also suggested the few steps what needs to be taken into account for making India to gain momentum in scientific research. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. On behalf of the organizing unit, CSI, IEEE Computer Society, and ACM, our sincere thanks for your time and effort in terms of delivering a wonderful talk, as well as answering the questions raised by participants, which are diverse in nature. In the satisfying way you have answered, and there also you have given your full thoughts in terms of brain. Now, I really appreciate the way it has been answered. Particularly those who, in fact, my professor also used to say that it is better to be the head of a goat rather than the tail of a lion. I really admire the way Dr. TR has put up that people not working in India, they are losing something. They are not getting respected in the country where they are working. But if the Indian situation slightly improves in terms of recognition and bring down the political bureaucracy, things will definitely improve in terms of more and more people working in India and contributing for the growth of India. So thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful presentation and your time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Varun. Thank you, Dr. Ramasami. Really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was well attended, sir.
Huh? நல்லா
Well
போச்சு.
attended.
ஆ,
More than 74 people have given their response.
ஆ.